Sometimes you read a book, and it turns out that book is not what you expected it to be, but it's a blessing in disguise. At other times, the same thing happens, and it feels like you took all the money that you spent on that book and just threw it out the window. Angels and Saints, a biblical guide to friendship with God's Holy One, is one of those books where I felt like I took my money and I chucked it out the window. I picked up this book primarily to read about the Catholic view regarding angels, and then also to read of their justification of the Catholic view of sainthood from their own perspective. Well, this book has a terrible and misleading title. It is not about angels and saints. This book is about saints with a little dash of angels thrown in the middle for good measure. This book simply frustrated me throughout, and like the other books that I have read on Roman Catholicism and reviewed on this channel, I always walk away feeling like there is even less biblical support for Roman Catholic doctrine than I thought going into the book. Welcome to Rev Reads, your home for Christian book reviews from the perspective of a pastor. If you're new to the channel and want to discover more eye-opening and informative books, I would encourage you to subscribe to the channel, to be a part of the family, to stay up with our most current reviews. And to the Roman Catholics who are watching this video, I'm sorry, this is just my honest opinion on Scott Hahn's work. Angels and Saints by Scott Hahn. I just don't get it. I don't understand how anyone reads the Bible and then walks away with the views of Roman Catholicism. Scott begins this book with a nice story of a sickness that his son had, followed by a miraculous recovery while on a pilgrimage. He has an interesting vision where God comes to Scott and speaks personally to him. He's encouraged by the words of Jesus, "Be not afraid," from Matthew 28:10. And then Scott quotes from Hebrews 12:1, which teaches us to look to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. And then following all of this communion with a vision of God, looking to Jesus, Scott then goes on to list the Virgin Mary, his guardian angels, and a whole bunch of saints who helped him through this ordeal. I'm sorry, but it wasn't Mary and the angels who were speaking to him. The author of Hebrews didn't say, "Fix your eyes on Mary and the saints." No, it is that Mary and the saints are fixing their eyes on Scott while he is supposed to be looking to Christ. And then he quotes from Philippians 4, 5, and 6. Let your requests be made known to who? Let your requests be made known to God. Not to Mary, not to St. Teresa. No, to God, right to God. But Scott ends the encounter by going to Our Lady and praying the Rosary. And I come away with this saying, do we read the same Bible? Does he even care about what these quotes are that he is putting in his own book? I just don't get it. There's actually some good stuff in chapters 2 and 3 on how Jesus is the only saint. There are no barriers that exist today between us and Jesus Christ. And Jesus is the good doctor who is among his people. And that's great. But then why does the Catholic Church set up these new barriers of going to the saints in the reception room when the doctor himself is waiting to speak with you? As Scott wrote, we share in God's holiness because we are in Christ. We have become partakers of the divine nature. Jesus condescended to be with us. If Jesus comes to be with you, why are you wasting your time with the rosary and seeking the help of the saints? I understand asking other Christians to pray for you, but when I hear someone praying to the saints, it really doesn't sound like they're saying, now, Saint such and such, please take my request and give it to God so I can receive grace from God. It seems a lot more like they're saying, please help me, Mary. I need your help. I mean, maybe I'm wrong in this, but that's just how it comes across to me. And I do like how Hahn brought out that we in the church are all saints. That is biblical. And I'm glad he mentioned that we are all saints. Every time the word saint is used in the New Testament, it's in the plural. Because the whole church, we are all saints. But then he gets in this business of the saints who are the all-stars, the venerated saints, which is nowhere found in the Bible and is basically just really a bunch of nonsense. I mean, it was interesting learning a little bit about some of the saints throughout the church age that I wasn't familiar with. I didn't know anything about Maximilian or Teresa, and I thought it was informative and at times enlightening to read their stories and their sacrifices for Christ and the church. My favorite chapter, though, in that section was on Monica and her son, and Monica's son was Augustine. Although it's my favorite chapter for reasons that Hahn probably wouldn't appreciate. Now, I see Augustine as a borderline heretic when it comes to the final teachings in his life. He brought a bunch of terrible doctrines into the church. And Hahn actually helped me a little bit with even more clarity on what some of the underlying problems were with Augustine's philosophies. Writing on Augustine's earlier Manichaeism, Scott wrote, its adherents claimed that their doctrine was completely rational and required no faith, which is intriguing because the modern day version of Augustinianism, which is Calvinism, the modern view of his theology, it's based on really a rational and philosophical reasoning that all belittles the necessity of faith in Jesus Christ. They believe in regeneration, being born again, before faith in Jesus. And then Scott also wrote this: Augustine didn't embrace Manichaeism. He never signed on as one of the elect. While that's true, the focus of Augustine's later theology ends up being on the same thing that he rejected from Manichaeism, and that is election. So Scott really helps the reader to understand some of the reasons that Augustine embraced these later positions on election and lowering the importance of faith in Christ when it comes to salvation. I did have a problem, though, when he lumped together the Manichaeans, the Donatists, and the Pelagians. Augustine views were actually a lot closer to Manichaean views than Pelagius's views. Pelagius, I think, was more doctrinally sound than Augustine, and Hahn also wrote, God does not will that any of us should ever sin. While Augustine wrote, in some sense, God wills everything that happens. So yes, sin is the will of God according to Augustine. So in closing, I just got to say, I don't understand Roman Catholic theology. And when I say that, I'm not insinuating that I can't comprehend Roman Catholic theology. But when I say I don't understand it, what I mean is I don't understand what the point of it is. When you can fix your eyes on Jesus Christ, why build little statues of saints and fix your eyes on Maximilian? When you can pray directly to Christ, why go through the process of praying to the saints when you can go right to the throne of grace? To me, it all smacks of Roman paganism and not the biblical understanding of the unique glory that Christ has in comparison to his saints. Roman Catholics have commented on my past reviews that if I will simply read more Roman Catholic books and study more church history, that eventually I will become a Roman Catholic. But I'm sorry, at this point, every Roman Catholic book I read pushes me further and further away from the church at Rome, and every book on church history I read makes me more glad that I am not under the shackles of Rome. So sorry, Scott Hahn, that you make leaps in your faith and barriers that are set up that take you further away from Christ. I hope that you will return to the scriptures, that you will fix your eyes on Jesus Christ and understand that that is the light of the world that we should all be focused upon.